Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, the policy committee meeting. It's not a long meeting. First, Kara, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, I'm going to just do introductions, starting with Kara.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Mary Kane, Senior Legal Counsel.
Liz Large, Contracted Single Legal Advisor.
Michelle DePass, board member.
Julia Brim Edwards, board member, committee member.
Patty Sullivan, Board Member, Committee Member.
Eddie Wong, board member.
Okay, so there's no public comment. We have two items on the agenda. One, they both have been on the agenda for quite some time, and I'm sorry that the meeting 2 weeks ago got canceled. I had an accident, and I couldn't make it to the meeting. So I'm going to start with the order there on the agenda. We have a cleaned up version of the lobbying and registration policy that's based on feedback from the last several committee meetings. And so I guess it's short, and I think it's worth noting that this is a registration, not a reporting policy, so it's kind of the most basic level of transparency, but not of very rigorous because it doesn't have a reporting mechanism in it. Does anybody want to go through it section by section, or do you feel like we've already done that, or is there any questions or discussion?
I feel like we've already done that, and I don't need to go over it again.
Take your time. That's
Yeah,
fine.
no, and I have no comments about it either. I was looking for the red line, but I think this is the final version that we've got in board book.
It reflects all the previous meetings' comments. Anything, Director Wong?
No, I missed last meeting. This was discussed. Was this? No questions right now.
Hey. Yeah. Do you want to join us on the dais? Yeah. Come on up. And you can start by, this will be like warm up for your board meeting. You can grab a seat, and here's the orientation I got.
Mm-hmm.
Your seat's here, and here's how you turn on the microphone.
Yep.
And it's hot. So why don't you go ahead, we just were starting the first agenda item. We already did introductions. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, so for the record.
Hello, my name is Ian. I'm the student representative-elect. And and I'm on policy committee.
Yeah, welcome to the policy committee. We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
We're just going through the both items we've had on the agenda for a number of meetings. I don't know, Director DePass, if you've had a chance to.
Yeah, I think I said at our last meeting when we discussed this that I like this. I think it increases transparency, and it kind of covers the area where our RFP process, it doesn't cover. The only question I had is this for construction and for personal services contracts for both?
So,
I mean, is it
so the
solely based on
So the construction processes would all be going through like an RFP.
Okay.
I'm
The
looking for them.
RFP,
I'm looking for
yeah.
that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking beyond you to the experts, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that those contracts go through our normal procurement and RFP process.
And those are under Oregon revised statute. I don't remember the number, but those are pretty strict contracting rules. Okay.
Right, so the PPS purchasing and contracting rules are based on those statutes. They do a little bit more, but they certainly meet that baseline.
Mhm.
To the extent those are required for an RFP process is required, it would not, they would be exempted from this process.
Okay, because that was my only question.
There may be low dollar value, technically construction, that are a $10,000 something that doesn't require competitive bidding. I don't know it to that level of detail. I want to be
Okay.
candid, but I think in the main, the big construction contracts are worth a lot of money, and they go through the,
Pretty rigorous process.
right, by statute and PPS policy.
Yeah, even most of the smaller ones, it's mostly the professional service contracts that aren't RFP'd, or, they say, grants or expenditures or policies. And
So it could be like I guess, not a construction, but architectural engineering.
if they didn't go
it-
through one of our procurement processes,
it
but
says-
most of
yeah.
them do.
Okay.
That's my understanding as a general proposition, yes.
Anyone else?
Well, just that I had questioned if it was necessary for a while, but in talking to different people who I trust, they think it is. So I will go, I think it's fine.
This also kind of mirrors what other public entities have in terms of, identifying who you are and what the nature of your business is, especially if it relates to contracts.
Yeah, the one thing this, as I mentioned at the beginning, this doesn't have is a reporting, which is what would be pretty standard. And there's a cost to that. For example, ballparking another like public agency, it was like about for the like a robust regular reporting requirement would be about 200,000 for like the IT infrastructure, and then like a portion of an FTE to manage it. So this was the lower cost version. So I would say it's not on par with the state or Metro or Multnomah County's recent one. It's more than most other school districts have, but it is not like an ongoing reporting and disclosure. Also, the other thing is, in most other cases, it doesn't matter what the size of the expenditure is that you're lobbying on. It could be like a $10,000 thing, and this sets 100,000. And part of that is, obviously we have schools that have contracts and expenditures that, if you had a lower amount, the compliance burden would be pretty significant for our schools. So those are ways in which it differs from, I would say, some other ones, but I think it's a good first start, and if it turns out it's adopted and implemented, that the board should monitor whether it's having its intended impact of surfacing what we know is the engagement that's happening, and can look at whether changes need to be made. That's a foundational piece.
And then the other question I have is the district shall establish a registration and reporting system. So it's up to the district to, am I looking at the right version? June 23rd, yeah, I'm looking at the one in board book. Under district registration, the district shall establish a public registration and reporting system on its website. Is that,
Is that a editing issue, Liz? No?
I think that concept has been there. That it's not a, it's, the reporting as in, you can see it.
Reporting the registrations.
Right, you can see it, similar to the Metro version, I think is what this was built on. So you can go to the Metro website and click on and
Oh.
see who's on it. So it's, I don't know
It's
if
like a report of
Google
who's
Doc.
actually registered versus a report of activity, which you may be, like the city has I've spent X number of dollars on something. I mean,
I was asking because I heard you say there's no registration, but you're talking about a listing of people who have engaged with the district on expenditures
That was my understanding when Director Bram Edwards described
Yeah,
what she wanted in here.
I view
They're
this
kind of
as like,
splitting hairs, but I'm
this is
curious.
a report of who's registered versus what I was talking about was reporting. So for the example, the city of Portland, every quarter, well, the same to the state, every quarter and then annually, you have to report engagement, whether you've spent any money. This is just, you register and there's a report. Does that make sense?
Okay, it does. I was thinking report as an active, reporting out regularly. But yeah, it does make sense.
It could say, I mean, given that very,
It's just a
what,
word.
analog level of reporting, right? It could just say, the district shall establish a public registration system on its website, and that may be more clear what the expectation is. I think and reporting is just another way to describe the function of that, but I don't think it's a separate thing. Because it has on its website, and that was the list, so I don't know if that's helpful or not.
To remove reporting.
And it would say, the district shall establish a public registration system on its
System.
website for those to register on its policy. The reporting is that people can see it, right? You could register on a website and then it
Sure.
goes someplace else. The idea was I
It's a
think,
public
yeah.
record.
It's a-
Yeah, you can go to
Yeah.
like Metro and see the 25 firms who, waste management because they care about the landfill or garbage hauling or something.
I would be okay removing the and reporting, because the reporting again sounds active.
How about
So
just report?
the district shall establish a public registration and report, rather than the district shall establish a public registration system on its website. It's not even a system, it would be like a document
A report.
or a report. A public report,
And report on its website for those required to register under this policy.
What about just posted? Registered and posted?
yeah, it would be posted, it's a static,
It says on its website, so we have the on its website language. Again, I think there are lots of different ways to,
How about just say,
Express.
post the registration on its website?
Publicly available?
Shall establish a public registration and post it on its website.
yes.
Okay, did you
Let's
get that?
keep going.
Cross out reporting system and just put in post it.
And posted on its website.
Anything else?
Could I ask, I actually want to,
can I just, one
Okay.
clarify, hold that thought, just before we leave that. Is it okay to say the district shall require a public registration and post the registrations? It may be that there's an intake form that looks different than the thing that's posted, right? So there's a summary, you fill it out and it maps to a list. Same content?
Yes.
I just want to make sure the individual, I think that's,
like Google Forms.
right, exactly.
Okay,
So
yes,
I
so it's-
just say, the district shall establish a public registration and post the registrations on the website. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Director
oh,
Wong?
before the conversation moved on, I wanted to ask a follow-up of Director Sullivan to, I don't know if you'd be happy to share some of the, you said you talked to trusted people and they said it was a good idea. You don't have to share who, but just a quick synopsis. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, I talked to Janice, and then she contacted the purchasing person, Emily, and they both, well, Emily thought it was fine. I just didn't want to make more problem for them. And they were fine with it. Janice, of course, with her audit skills, thinks it's really important to have this. So I really am not familiar with this kind of reporting system, so I went to people who are, and who I trust, so that's where I got it.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate the thoroughness of the looking into it and things.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping for to hear.
I appreciate you didn't just Google it. I think it's good generally that, you know, it increases transparency, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Recommendation from the committee to move it to the board for first reading.
Yes.
Any objection?
Second. If we do that, we don't
Okay.
second, do it.
Yeah, well, we're not approving it, we're just recommending it out. And just for transparency, I did talk to Christy, who, like me, has lived in this world for a long period of time. And I'm going to sort of ask her to sort of shepherd it along. And so she was happy to do it. Again, this is something that it's just part of our regular life. Probably, I don't know what those things are for a kindergarten teacher, but it's sure it's not the lobbying registration. Okay, so we'll send that out. The next item on the agenda is the amendment to the ethics and conflict of interest policy. In the it relates to section 8, and probably the easiest way, because there was so much redlining. The version that's in the board book, it's now a two-sentence amendment. Current board members may not apply for or accept any offer of employment from the district. Exceptions are granted if a board member sends a written communication to all board members stating their intent to potentially pursue school-based employment in the district. And so just to share how we got to this, and then we can have a discussion or questions, in November of last year, I raised this with the policy issue in the policy committee. On January 13th, we had another policy committee meeting. On February 25th, we had a policy committee referral to the full board. On March 18th, we had a first reading at a board meeting. On April 3rd, at that meeting, with the first reading, then the April 3rd, there was an amendment for a school-based exemption in a board member's last 6 months based on concerns raised by Director Wong. On April 8th, we were scheduled to have, on April 8th, we had the first reading that had the amendment that had been offered about school-based employment, just knowing that there's a different hiring cycle. On May 16th, or May 6th, there was a second reading scheduled. And because of other things on the board agenda, we moved the second reading to the next full meeting, which wasn't till June 10th. And so the second reading, and we had policy committee meetings there where this was listed as an agenda item. On June 10th, we had a board meeting in which Director Wong wanted to make additional changes. I sent something out to the full board. Subsequently, Director Wong and I had a conversation. He wanted some additional changes. I thought that I had made them reflective, and I believed it was this version, but we can have a discussion about it because that's what the committee meeting is for. So, and during the time when Director Wong and I talked about it, he wanted this committee to have further discussion, so that's what this time's about.
Well, didn't our whole board voted to send it back to the committee? The whole board. So,
I'm sorry, did I say something different?
No, I thought you said that Eddie Wong, Director Wong's, you had a discussion about it, but
Well, I had
the
it
entire
after.
board decided to send it back to here today.
Right, and what I'm saying is, this version is different from what I sent out after the board meeting.
It is.
And what I'm saying is this version came from a conversation I had, because what we talked about at the meeting, which I thought I captured and then sent out, I then subsequently had a discussion afterwards with Director Wong, and this is what I thought reflected of it.
Just want to kind of correct, we had a discussion first, and then the crossed off version was sent to the rest of the board for review. However, this version here has, or the original one that was sent out to the board after our discussion had school-based crossed off. But the problem here is that this version does not have school-based crossed off. So there's discrepancy between the one that was shared with the board and this current one.
Yeah, and as I mentioned to you, Director Wong, and that's why we're having a committee discussion, is I made some changes based on the discussion we had, and all along, the exemption had been for school-based employment, and that this strikeout was an error on my part of sending that out with it still struck out. But I had, like I say, all previous versions I thought you made a compelling case that the hiring cycle is different for school-based employment versus central office employment. I say,
Yeah.
this is the committee's preference if they want to. This is the opportunity to offer changes. I mean, I say there has been at every policy committee meeting when it's been out for first reading, had an opportunity for people to offer changes in committee, so.
Yeah, I just want to offer really quick. The reason, the only version I was okay with was one without when school-based was crossed off. And the reason for that is because a good policy allows for maximum flexibility in case unforeseen circumstances come up, right? For example, we don't have a problem of people knocking on our door to work here. And I just want to address the reality. We've had a finance office that was unstaffed for almost 5 years. And so the reason why I was okay with school-based crossed off, again, this is just my 2 cents to offer to the committee, was because number one, the superintendent is not directly involved in the employment of most of the employees in this district, whether it's school-based, even people like, for example, the maintenance workers in our maintenance department are not hired by the superintendent. They're hired by the office director or chiefs or whatnot. And so there's already levels of separation. Actually, there's 3 points I want to make. Number two, we already have Oregon ethics laws that address a lot of this. I think I just looked it up right here. ORS 244.040 and .045 I want to also mention as well. So I'm a little bit worried that the more specific we are, the more we're almost double legislating this issue. And then the third thing, or not the third thing, it's still the second thing, .040 on that part of the ORS actually explicitly names certain departments and avenues that people cannot apply for their job, until a year after their employment serving in these areas. But I don't know if it was purposeful or not. This is something worth looking into, but school boards were not listed under there. And I'm curious as to why. And so that would be, I think, also something to look into. And then I guess my third and main point here is that we really should be focusing our work and our policies. And I want us to take the time. I didn't want to, overstep or skip over the role of the policy committee and allow the policy committee to have a voice in drafting the final version. And I guess what I mean by that is that the question always that should be like our centering question is, does this help or hurt students? And I don't really see many ways in which this helps students. I can see some ways that can actually hurt students. right? We potentially had examples in the past where it may have actually it could lead to hurting the district in a few ways. So when asked that question, my thing is, what's the hurry? We don't have people who are currently looking for employment in the district. I'd rather spend the time to craft something that can be achieve its goal, but also allow for enough flexibility so that we're not hurting us or the district in the long run. So anyways, that's my 5 cents. Thank you.
So do you think this does that, or do you think?
I think having school-based in there is problematic. And the reason for that is because I think without school-based, it still achieves its goal, because what we have here is a restriction, but you are allowed an exception if all the board members are notified. Therefore, it allows public transparency. And by notifying all the board members, right, it's subject to public record laws, which means that if people wanted to look into if there's any shenanigans going on, they can, because this is now public record. Not only that, but all board members are notified. And so it allows its oversight and transparency without being overly restrictive, especially in potential scenarios that could actually hurt the district.
How do you see that being publicly transparent? How are people going to know to ask for a public record?
Because when they find out a board member is suddenly working for the district,
But how would?
I would think that would be kind of obvious.
Oh, so it would be afterwards, people would have a public records request about whether somebody was applying for a job before they notified someone?
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, PPS actually has very strong policies in terms of the hiring practice. Actually, it's policies and
Actually,
practices in terms of
I'm just trying to
hiring.
get at how the public would know, because you stated that this would add transparency, but I see if somebody sent a communication to board members that actually the public wouldn't know unless a board member publicly shared it.
Yeah, well, I assume that we have 7 elected board members. If all the rest of 6 of them are notified and there's something going on, it's also the board's job to oversee itself.
But that's not public. I mean, that's more of like board, just, there's
All it takes
there's
is one
visibility.
board member to say, hey, there's this thing going on, and suddenly people know.
Is that what you expect people to do? I mean,
Can we also get back to,
well, I'd like
This-
to sort of
Okay.
settle this question, because I think if that's what we're saying, the public is it's not really accomplishing that. So I would suggest if you dropped it, to have something that it be put in some sort of report that it's just public, because otherwise it's not public. And I don't think we should, I mean, as a board member, I wouldn't think it would be another board member's responsibility to share with the public, so it's public.
I would just like to say that I agree that I think this policy doesn't really do enough on its face in terms of transparency, which I do agree should be something that we're looking at here. It's there is, an informal process, but we don't really want to rely on an informal process, especially with something like transparency. There's a lot of people who would be really mad if all the board members just forgot to tell people that someone's, working, and there's a possibility that there could be some outcry about that. I didn't know that my board representative is, working for the district. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to reply really quick, because this issue of transparency is not the original question that you asked. The original question was whether it's school-based or not. That has nothing to do with transparency.
I guess I was just going to your argument. So I was, I felt that the questions you raised and the concerns about just the cycle was a legitimate concern. And frankly, at the very beginning, I thought having it be the last 6 months made sense of somebody's term, that they, could go back to if that had been their profession before, they shouldn't be exempted from that. And then you raised that also, maybe in the middle of the term they'd want it. So it's okay, I also felt that was somewhat reasonable. I think it's naive to think that a principal who's interviewing a sitting, or any manager who's interviewing a sitting board member, is not going to feel some imbalance of power. And I think that's completely true for the central office. And I think it raises all sorts of potential ethical issues for board members to be, I use the example of, so everybody reports to the superintendent. The superintendent, not only do we evaluate them, we vote on their compensation, we vote on budgets, we ask them to weigh in on, on pretty much every item that we vote on. And I think it is, it's a classic imbalance of power, and that, I just think it will be very unfair to employees who have a board member in the pool. I felt like for a school-based employee, there's some distance. Again, I think it's still hard on principals or who's ever the hiring manager. But school board is a volunteer service, so it shouldn't prevent people from going back to their profession.
This already states that you may not work for the district while you're on the board, right? In another part of it, so we know that.
Right, that's actually in current statute.
Yeah.
Again, I
I-
strongly disagree. I just want to say that policies are not. There's two parts. Again, just a refresher. Right? We have policies and then we have administrative directives. And the reason we have it set that way is because policies are supposed to be 30,000 feet above the air. Their general guidelines, spirit, set the direction, and then we have ADs to specify how it's done. And the reason it's done that way is because things change. Right? We have AI now. We have things that we didn't have in the past, and so having the AD being flexible allows it to change, and obviously with the spirit of the policy intact. And so this one of the issues I have is that when we have a policy that is overly prescriptive, it makes it very hard to change, and it can actually cause more damage than it solves. In fact, there's been multiple cases of policies that are overly prescriptive that has actually caused a lot of unintended consequences, and also maybe even raising costs for the district. And so one of the things that I want to also point out here is that, again, the absolute issue, I can almost guarantee everybody who has worked in education before is not really concerned about this. We have a problem of getting people in the door, not the other way around. And so, again, the essence of this is it's a solution looking for a problem. I mean, we don't have a history of board members taking advantage of their position, trying to find employment in the district. We don't. Maybe at the state level, sure. At the county level, sure. But not in schools. I mean, we have people who are overworked 12 hours a day, at least, and underpaid. And so it's like, this is something that if we don't or we're not careful with, could potentially hurt the district, right? For example, luckily we found an amazing CFO, but what if we had a CFO that was on the board? Or let's look at also the equity issue, because a majority of our employees are teachers. A majority of our employees are school-based. Also, a majority of our employees also, like working in the district, like maintenance crew, they're not paid a lot. And so it's very likely that if someone decides to run for the board, especially if you want people from, not the upper class, that they may economically have a difficult time, and 2 years in may choose to want to go back to work and not able to serve on the board anymore. And that's a very likely. So if we're trying to lower the bar to entry and allow people to go back to their jobs, in the middle of their, maybe they need to quit the board. And so having a situation where we say school-based, then what about all our, security officers, maintenance workers, all the people who are not maybe at cabinet level. And so I understand the intent of this. I just, don't agree that this is a real problem that it's solving. And not only that, but by solving it, and I'm fine with you trying to solve it. I don't mean you and anybody individually, just in general you. Generally, you trying to solve it. I am worried about it raising the bar for entry for a lot of people.
I think that's an equity issue that's concerning to me as well. It also feels like a problem or a solution looking for a problem. We had, I think, one time 13 years ago where somebody on the board did apply for a job.
And got a job made especially for them. That was a
and
high-paying
that's
job.
kind of water under the bridge. And Director Wong, to your point about, how the policies that we create can hurt or harm people, particularly when we look at people that are earning not very much money. We want to encourage those people to serve on the board as volunteers. And it's not easy to serve if you're struggling financially. I can speak for that specifically. So I don't even think there's a problem that needs solving, but I would be willing to continue to talk about this if it's agreed that we've got a problem that needs to be solved. But right now it doesn't seem like we have a problem that needs to be solved. Additionally, I just went to a policy institute at Howard through the National School Boards Association, and they were pretty adamant about saying any policy that you develop needs to be student outcome based. It would be a completely different story if we had parity between, our white students and our students of color, but we don't. We have a large spread. We as a board, as the adults, should be 110% focused on raising those scores and doing everything in our power, including policies that do that, and not spend our time and our volunteer precious time that we can't get back looking for a problem. I would be willing to keep this on the table, but I don't feel like it's ready as it's written.
I think we should remove it from the table because, frankly, it's slipping into being completely irrelevant. I'll just note that this is an amendment to a 8-page policy around ethics and conflicts of interest, which I hope the board believes that's an important thing for us to set as a standard for a public school district. So this isn't like some new thing. It's part of a much larger policy. I think it's setting high ethical standards. It's a stretch to say this is going to hurt students. I actually think when people trust people in elected office, that they ran for the board not to find a job in the district or to be able to get it easier to get a job at the district, that they ran for the board because they wanted to serve in a volunteer capacity on behalf of our school district. I guess I would go back to the original. And I purposely went through this at the very beginning, the amount of time that we had on the committee to people could offer suggestions. I don't believe that this is at all transparent or public by just notifying other board members. So I think that would be, so I don't think that should be the claim. So if you wanted to say that this was the way that we're going to set an ethical standard is by having it be public, I think it needs to be something else. And again, I thought in the spirit of our conversation, Director Wong, that I had captured that, but I clearly didn't. But I don't think this captures or leads to transparency, because as a board member, I wouldn't be outing somebody else's or sharing somebody else's information. So that's unless we ask the individual that is doing it themselves.
It almost seems like the way this is written, it doesn't make any difference. Anybody can apply. I mean, anybody can send a written communication and say they're going to do it. So,
well, to me, that's why school-based. To me, that's why school-based. Because in theory, you're supposed to wait till after you get off the board service before you apply for a job, because you have a natural. Frankly, you have a natural advantage if you're a board member and you're applying from. You're the top of the organizational chart. And so, again, I feel like for school-based jobs, that's very different.
Because of you have to apply 6 months ahead, pretty
Right,
much. And that's
because
what we
of,
talked
because of
about
the
in the
hiring
first place.
cycle.
Yeah.
And, everybody else, this is maybe just like we come down to different places. I think people should wait till they're off to the board. Or if they feel like they can't serve on the board and they need to apply for a job, then they should leave the board. Or there needs to be some method, but that's more public, because this is not a public process, and waiting till after they get hired, and a principal has maybe felt pressured to hire a board member because they applied, and they have, board members can create issues for
My
staff.
issue with that is, what if they get rejected from the job?
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Right, like I mentioned this in our board meeting, but like when we apply for jobs, it's normally general practice that it's a private affair, because there's many reasons you could be rejected. It could, you could be down to 2 finalists, one person just has a little bit more experience, or you could just be totally unqualified, or you could be a plain jerk, right? And so there's many
Or
reasons
maybe-
why you don't get accepted, and so having it, again, this is another issue that I think this policy committee needs to address when pursuing this, is what happens in the worst case scenario. Like, for example, if I'm a public figure and I apply for a job and then I publicly get rejected, now I have a black letter on my forehead, and no one's going to, we live in the Facebook world, right? Or no one's going to look into why you got rejected. They're just going to say, oh yeah, this person got rejected from this job, and we're not going to hire them either. And so we're talking about public volunteers. This is an unpaid job. And I also want to specify, in terms of, we have this perception of the board member, in Oregon law, it defines that, or policies, it defines that single board members have no authority, have no power. Only the board as a whole, as a unit, actually has any power to make any decisions. And so there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is because, again, having a full board, 7 elected, in our case, 7 elected public officials making decisions ensures proper discussion, sharing of, or potential arguing of ideas to strengthen our decision-making process. And so, again, this is something where, again, I also personally think this is not ready. I think there's a better way to do it.
Okay. It's 5:15, which is when the meeting was supposed to end. I would say, going forward, as a courtesy to committee chairs, committee members, that when something's on an agenda, to look at it in advance. I would have appreciated several times when things came up at the board meeting that they'd come up in committee, because then we could have had discussions about it. Because I think that leads to actually better policy making versus waiting to the second reading. Because the reality is we had no public comment of people having issues with it. So we can leave it. We can leave it in committee, and I'm fine with that. I don't think we should move out a version that has school-based, because again, I think it's extremely naive and it sets a very low ethical standard to have board members applying for jobs in the central office or ones that are within the superintendent's span of control. So with that, I'll just close the committee and we're done. We'll send one. Thanks for sending one committee policy out for the first reading. Appreciate everyone's work, and Michelle and Patty, your service on the committee this year. And thanks for coming to the one board meeting. And Eddie, thanks for coming to many of the meetings.
If I may ask real quick, when are we being sworn in? I'm pretty sure, is it July 1st?
Yes, I thought it was July 22nd.
We have 2 ceremonies. So one is the legal one, which I think is just going to be notarized, and then there's a ceremonial one, which is going to be on July 22nd.
Got it. That makes sense.
And the reason for the ceremonial one was because the other board members wanted it to happen on July 22nd. And also
because
of
that's when they'll
travel
all be in
conflicts.
town.
Yeah, all travel conflicts,
The
etc.
one day.
But we
everybody will
want to
be
do it
available.
legally, I think July 1st, because we don't want any holes in coverage in case something comes up.
Anything else?
No.
Thanks for coming to the first meeting.
Yeah. Well, it's like my second policy committee meeting.
Okay.
Technically, I should have been at 3, but I missed the first one because
Okay.
I was at site council.
Okay, well, thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
All right,
Yeah.
especially your summertime, I mean,
Yeah. Well, it's easier in the summertime because theoretically I have nothing going on. Clearly not today because I was
okay,
late,
that's such a great
but,
attitude, and you like,
You know.
you got a tie on too.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I'm gonna adjourn.